Hi, my name is Carmen Mays, and I am so glad that you are joining me today to kick off my Black Business Month series called Take the Leap, where we will be exploring the top 3 reasons why creatives don't take the leap into entrepreneurship. And we want to make sure that we educate folks and let them know that they have resources. You do not have to be afraid to take that leap. So make sure you tune in to this session and the subsequent sessions to get as much information as you possibly can so that you can take the leap into entrepreneurship when you're ready. All right, so let's get into this first session. I am joined by my good friend, Taliba Bales. Taliba and I go way back, y'all, way back
Yes.
to grade school. Our families have known each other since before we were probably born. And she is very good people. And aside from being a great person, she is also an excellent bookkeeper and tax professional. And so I would like to welcome her to the stage and turn it over to her to tell you a little bit more about what she does and how you can become one of her clients.
Well, thank you so much, Carmen. And yes, we have known each other for forever, and so I am always excited to work with you. You're doing great things in the small business community, and I'm happy to join you guys today. I am the founder and CEO of TNB Tax and Financial Services, and we specialize in creating bankable CEOs. And today we're going to specifically be focusing on how you can take the leap and sort of navigate through what may be an anxiety causing or just this whole big gray area about your taxes, about your, what structure should you have, how should you plan and startup costs. Those are all the things that we work with CEOs on. And so again, we're going to get over some great stuff today for you.
Awesome. So to jump right into it, we there's a lot of entrepreneurship shame out there. And I always tell people entrepreneurship is a spectrum. It looks different for everyone, just like our lives vary from person to person, so does our entrepreneurship journey. So let's talk about quitting or not quitting your
Mm-hmm.
job.
Mm-hmm.
So some people think that you are not a real entrepreneur unless you do it full time. I'm not one of those people. I think you can have a successful side hustle. I think you could do many things. But let's talk about preparing. So if you're working full time, particularly in this economy, which is important, people do not quit your job in a
Mm-hmm.
poor economy just in case you have to go back. How do you prepare financially to take the leap into entrepreneurship?
Well, Carmen, I agree with you on not being so quick. To quit your job. I founded TNB Tax and Financial Services in 2006 when I was still working for the Department of Justice. So I had that strategic plan. I wasn't about to quit my comfortable six-figure paying job to say, hey, y'all, 100% entrepreneur. It was a process. And so, what I recommend when it comes to preparing strategically for your financial position with your business is the first thing you need to know is how much does it take for you to survive, you, the individual. What are your household related expenses? If you have a mortgage, what is that? If you're renting, what is that? Your utilities, food expenses. Know your personal expenses because this is where you're going to have to sacrifice. Right. This is where when you start adding on the financial responsibilities of being a business owner, you're going to have to decide, hey, am I going to be able to go on these quarterly trips or whatever it is that you have been splurging on, so to speak. That's the area where you need to just write a list down of your recurring expenses because you want to have that in focus. And then you want to also research the industry that you're trying to enter, which means, know if there are licenses that are required for you to operate in your business because you want to start there in what that costs, what's that, and also what time is going to be required for you to get through that complete certification or again whatever the licenses are in that industry. And then even something as simple as going on to an office supply company's website and pricing equipment, or pricing office furniture. But there's so much information that you have at your fingertips. But again, we just want to strategically identify those. That's where I would start.
Cut that part out. So you're talking about making sacrifices,
Hmm.
but people don't want to do that.
Hmm.
And so, what are some other ways? Are we seeing people move back home? Are we seeing people move in with friends or significant others to make it work? How have you seen this modeled out in some of the people that you've worked with?
I would say all of the above. When I left the DC metropolitan area and came back here to Birmingham, I definitely did that because, again, and it really just depends on um, how quickly you want to enter, the 100% business owner model, right?
Mhm.
For me, I was still working with the Department of Justice when I relocated back to Birmingham, but I knew that I wanted to transition out of that. So, it just depends on how quickly you want to move, and again, your timeline, your list of, like, hey, I know this is how much it's going to cost me. I know this is how much I have in my nest egg, whether that be a savings account, whether that be a 401k that you've had as a W 2 employee. But it's really is going to boil down to how committed you are to
Mhm.
those goals that you're identifying. If that's going to require you to have that list of personal expenses and start crossing it out, saying, okay, I don't want to pay $1,200 in rent. So I'm going to move in with my parents, or I'm going to move in with friends for 6 months. You want to be specific, specifically identify that amount of time so it doesn't seem so scary and it seems like a feasible plan.
Awesome. So let's move into startup costs. Now we have our personal finances together. We know how much we got to pay our parents in rent, or we move into our auntie's basement, or however we make it work. How do you gauge startup costs? And it's, I know it's different, but
Hmm.
we know that creatives and Black people in general, minority populations, we over index in service industry. So when
Hmm.
we're talking about hairdressers, clothing designers, seamstresses, dancers, other kinds of artistic expression, UX designers, architects, when you're offering a service, how do you guesstimate those startup costs?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I would say, that you're entering into the creative space at an advantage, because you don't really have to focus on a brick and mortar location. You don't really have to go into that industry saying, and my office address is, so that is, and rent is one of the biggest expenses that really this new environment of being a business owner in the pandemic realm has really allowed for that acceptance, for you to not have office space, and for you to essentially be working from home. And so that's why, going back to what we were saying before, knowing what your personal expenses is, particularly in the rent category, right? You want to use those as baselines for, hey, now I'm going to enter into the service market of starting my business. What is the bare minimum that I have to have in order to keep a roof over my head, and in order to continue the life that how I've been experiencing it before being a business owner? But again, just like the basic startup costs, for the creatives world, again, is going to be your licensure. If there's any requirement that you have an operating license, whether it be from the city that you're located in, the county that you're located in, having that license to operate. And again, depending on which area of the creative world you're going into, it may be that you have to pay some type of space fee, or anything related to that. Know what that is. That's why I say you need to definitely have a very solid grasp of what the costs are going to be for you to get started in your area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm always surprised how little people know about the actual operationalizing of their dream. They just know they the baddest tattoo artist that ever did exist. And I'm like, I agree. But
Mm-hmm.
how you gonna do that? And so I think that demystifying operating costs is something, and I will always suggest if you know that there is an existing successful person doing what you do, reach out to them and ask them about their startup costs. Now, granted, if they've been if you ask Mr. Etheridge about the startup costs of his barbershop, it's gonna be different. If you asking somebody who didn't start their shop 30, 40, 50 years ago. But
Yeah.
I think it's always good to professionally shadow someone and get an understanding of how the business works. So let's talk about something that's really hard, even for the most seasoned of business owners, projections.
Mm.
So, once you take the leap, once you out there, you got your booth, you have your home office,
Mm-hmm.
and you're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to project
Mm-hmm.
how much money you're going to make. How do you do that? How do you decide what you do from month to month in the future?
Okay. And so Carmen, you know this because we do this all the time with your business. So you probably have heard me go on this step on the podium a million times. But I have to stay consistent in saying that in order for you to have projections, you need to know your numbers. You got to have numbers first. So once you've done that research, you know what the startup costs are, and you've said, I'm doing this. You got your license, your booth's open, then now we need to switch into what is your accounting infrastructure? How do you know your numbers? Now, people always are like, there's that extra, I don't know what you're talking about, like this is now you're making me feel really responsible. What does that mean? It can really be something as basic as a spreadsheet. And but if you're not a Excel pro, or if you're not going to have that discipline to literally be going into that Excel spreadsheet and developing a routine on updating your expenses, I promise y'all, having an accounting software that's connected to your business checking accounts is so much easier. You know what I mean? Because it's more of an automated process, and at least you have a solid foundation in capturing what your income and your expenses are. And in that case, you're able to say, all right, so it looks like for January through March, I brought in roughly $5,000, but I spent $10,000 literally each month. Right. And so now you're able to look at those figures, figure out, well, what does this $10,000 entail? Do I really need to be spending $10,000 a month? It could be a bona fide expense regiment, right? But in order for you to know that, again, you got to have your systems in place, your numbers in one iteration. And then from there, you're able to say, well, if I operate at this same basis, meaning
Mhm.
if I get no more clients and I don't spend anything different from what I've spent from January through March, then your projections are easy. But the power in knowing your numbers, and it's so much more than the word projections, because underneath that you're able to identify, like I said, spending habits. You're able to develop goals to say, well, it looks like $10,000 is what it takes for me to be in business. Now I got to look at increasing my income. So that's where you're
Mhm.
able to look at that and say, I need to be bringing in more than 5,000. That could be getting more clients. That could be increasing your prices with your current clients. That could be, a whole host of things. Perhaps, collaborating in a different area, doing pop-up shops, doing events, getting your visibility up. But all of those operational decisions are made from knowing your numbers.
Yes, I love, like, I tell people, if you don't know your numbers, people assume you don't know your business. And I
Mm,
know people don't feel like that's true, but particularly creatives. But I'm saying, like, y'all, like, your art is great.
mhm,
Your presentation, your ability to do things that other people can't do well is wonderful. But if you don't make any money,
mhm,
then you have a hobby. And so
mhm,
it's very important to know your numbers, to be clear about what stuff costs, and also to understand price elasticity. I know Taliba says you can raise your prices, but you got to understand your market and you have to know where they are financially.
mhm.
and that there's only so much you can charge each market segment.
Mm-hmm.
So that if the people that you're serving can't pay beyond a certain amount, you're either going to have to increase how many people you're serving or come up with another revenue stream,
Mm-hmm.
um, or change the people that you serve. You may have to leave that market and
Mm-hmm.
go to a higher bracket in the market. So but knowing your numbers enables you to do all that kind of stuff. Without any information, you just all over the place, not making any money and wasting a bunch of time. So make sure you do know your money. So now that we have set up our finances, let's talk about taxes, because this is where people mess up all the time, and not and we're just not as educated on our tax system as we should be. I mean, most people who are starting businesses only know about their income tax, and more than likely they're not preparing them themselves. And so when you add business on it, there are all
Mm-hmm.
these myths about, oh, that's a business expense, you can just write that off,
Mm-hmm.
as if like you don't have to pay for it, or
Mm-hmm.
all these other myths. So what are some basic rules around taxes that folks taking the leap need to understand?
Well, you really hit the nail right on the head. It taxes again is something like all of finances. It seems like adds this whole level of like so. Talking about this during the take the leap is just spot on because we actually give ourselves anxiety unnecessarily because the importance of making sure that you're taking the leap in a strategic way is partnering with a professional that knows what the heck they're talking about. Don't go for the smoke and mirrors. Do your research. You want to make sure when it comes to taxes, you are talking to someone who has experience in filing taxes for business owners. This is very, very different than walking into a big name tax place or even a mom and pop's tax place.
Mm-hmm.
The first question you need to ask the person you're working with is, hey, do you have experience in filing taxes for business owners? Because that gets, when you don't do that, that gets you into trouble because you could be dealing with a professional that's only used to dealing with a certain type of client. So they're not going to be aware of what can be written off. They're not going to be aware of certain strategies like business entity optimization, which is a very powerful and strong strategy that the tax professional needs to know about and look down, sit at your numbers and see if that's something that's applicable to you. So just ask that basic question first of all: do you have experience in filing taxes for business owners? After you've already done your research and made your appointment with that individual. And so when it comes to taxes, I always do start at what is your legal entity structure. Now, I know, especially in this space, that most creatives opt to just stay, a 1099 employee.
Mm-hmm.
Get that. Or 1099 contract, I'm sorry. I get that 100%. And for a little bit, there has been sort of this acceptance and a reward in the last round of PPP where, solopreneurs were able to benefit from a type of funding that didn't require a lot of fuss, right? It just
Mm-hmm.
required a tax return. However, when you look at it from a long strategy standpoint and filing taxes, it may be more beneficial for you to consider, instead of just being a solopreneur, be a single member LLC, because you're going to have legal protections and then you're going to be able to be in sort of a next level on strategizing, not owing so much money by getting all of this untaxed money that you would otherwise get in a 1099. Because a lot of times, and they really have to observe this, when you're entering into a contract with an entity as a contractor, you can say, oh, hey, actually, I'm filling out this W 9 and I want to fill it out in my LLC's EIN and not my social. It's as simple as that. And they will recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have knowing the person, making sure your person actually works with business owners and filing taxes, looking at and discussing with that person that business entity structure, that you're considering, and weigh the costs. This is not only just financial costs, but legal costs of
Mhm.
remaining a solopreneur versus a single member LLC. And once you get set in those things, then you're going to have a tax strategy year round, because we don't want just one, oh, it's tax time, y'all, come get your refund. But no, you want to be talking about taxes throughout the year as a business owner.
Yeah, that is what that was one of the greatest shifts because taxes only come up for like 6 weeks out of the year.
Hmm.
You get everybody get their W-2s, you send your stuff off, you get your tax return, everybody end up in Tulum, right? So that has been, but what is important, particularly as you build a business, as you're working to move out of the space from working for someone to working for yourself, you will take on a lot of responsibility. Taxes is one of those things. Another one of those things are your benefits. And
Mm.
that is so daunting because you don't really think about it as much if you've been an employee, but
Hmm.
paying for your own insurance,
Hmm.
like all of it,
Yeah.
paying, inputting your own
Hmm.
retirement funds, your own life insurance. If you're depending on what your industry is within the creative economy, there may be different types of liability insurance
Hmm.
that you will need. And liability insurance has changed
Hmm.
since COVID, y'all. Like they are not, they are changing those policies because they do not want to have to pay out
Hmm.
if you get sued for people come into your business that they got infected in your business. If you're not operating um, with the most current acceptable or CDC backed standards, your claims may be denied. Like insurance companies are not playing. And
Hmm.
so what are your thoughts or input tips around setting up benefits? When should you start? Do you need to set up benefits from the start, or is this something you do later on in your business? Talk to us about the benefits part.
So this is a really good topic because it goes back to like strategically removing yourself from a W-2 environment to the self-employed environment. And I think that there has always been this implicit understanding, though not the best thing, but an implicit understanding that those of us that are 100% business owners, no W-2, are operating in the blind without insurance. I mean, because when you come to, remember, we talked about that word sacrificing. When it comes to sacrificing and you developing a startup plan that's going to get you started in the most strategic way so you can start earning some income, insurance and stuff is probably not on their list. My personal opinion, based on what I did, transitioning from W-2 to 100%, is I actually didn't have insurance. It's crazy, right? I know a lot of people are like, what? So I did not, me personally, I did not have insurance, but I did make sure that my family did. But it was just more affordable when it came to my budget for me to take the risk. And that's not always healthy. And Carmen, I know you're gonna have a segment on on this whole mindset when it comes to, your health, your mental health and your physical health. But typically, most business owners have a startup plan through which that insurance is not on there, especially if you're not operating in an industry that actually requires it. But I do want to say that, just because I didn't prioritize it doesn't mean that that was the right thing to do. I wanted to be vulnerable and transparent in that point to let you know that you're not doing it wrong if you don't start out 100% with a health insurance plan, a life insurance. But you absolutely, we talk about sort of that 5-year plan or 2-year, 3-year plan. You absolutely want to work that in, you know what I mean, because you don't want to be like, like I was. Okay, you get sick and then you're just like at home trying to you know what I mean, you don't want that at all. And fortunately, when I contracted COVID, by that time I had health insurance. Imagine what that would have been if I didn't. So you don't want to go too long without that, operating in the blind on the health insurance. But the professional and liability insurance, that you're talking about, Carmen, I want to say that that should be first. You know what I mean? That's obviously less expensive than a health insurance plan, especially if you have multiple family members. But that is something that I had actually before I had health insurance, because when you are interfacing with the public or you have clients that are coming into your space, or if you want to bid on certain contracts, they do require professional and liability insurance and other types of bonding insurance and things of that nature. So you want to, have that startup costs and those estimates. I would say in your startup plan for year one or at least year two. Again, when it comes to the level of sacrifice, right? And having something that you can kind of hit the ground and implement as soon as possible.
All right, that is good stuff. And I hope y'all make sure when you're getting insurance, you're reading the fine print.
Hmm.
Figure out how this works with COVID. Because again, I don't want you to have to you file a claim and it's denied. Because again, this is a new territory we are in, and insurance companies never want to come about the money
Hmm.
ever,
I want you to
ever,
pay
ever, ever. So,
everybody.
so make sure you're following all the rules of your policies and you're not cutting corners, because I'm telling you, when you need them, you want them to be there. You don't
Hmm.
want them to tell you no, we
Hmm.
can't do this,
Hmm.
because you more than likely won't have a business to run any further. But we have talked and covered a lot of ground. Taliba, please let everyone know where they can find you, how they can become a client, ask you questions, all that good stuff.
Okay. So the quickest way is to find me on IG. It's simple as TMB Tax, TMB Tax. Follow us on Instagram. There you can send us a DM. You'll see all the different ways that we work with CEOs. As we mentioned, the cornerstone service where we started was always tax preparation. And so now we have expanded that to accounting, bookkeeping, loan packaging for federal loans, for grants, because you got to have financial statements for grants now, as well as just overall tax filing strategy as a business owner. So that's going to be TMB tax. Right. And then one thing I want to say that Carmen had touched on, if I can, when it comes to knowing your numbers, one of the things that, believe it or not, that you kind of miss when you don't know your numbers is you miss the opportunity to actually put respect on your own name. And what I mean by that is, if you're just going along on a daily basis grinding like most business owners are doing, and you're not knowing where you are, where you stand with your numbers, you may be missing an opportunity to pat yourself on the back. Because using myself, I do everyone's books. My books are usually the last books that get done. I looked at my year end numbers last year and I was like, oh, wait, girl, wait a minute. You were kicking it. You were rocking it. And so, know your numbers allows you to feel like all the working that you're doing is worth it. And if it doesn't, it gives you that courage to say, okay, I don't like what that looks like. Let me do more. Right. But most importantly, especially when it comes to your prices and it comes to you looking at your numbers and either being patting on your back or now let me, get to grinding a little bit more. When you tell your client your price, you're going to stick to that because you've identified your goals. And you
Mhm.
and when a client sees that you're putting respect on your name, you're coming to the table 100% set on, this is what I require, because I know the service I'm providing to you is well over probably the price. You having that respect on your own name, I'm telling you, it becomes contagious, and it really helps you in identifying the people who are really worth being your client.
Absolutely. That's right. Use your numbers to put some respect on your name.
Yes.
Yes, I agree. I had that same revelation in one of our sessions. I was like, oh, I'm a real life business lady. So yes, it is important. It's very important because entrepreneurship is hard, and having mechanisms set up like having your finances together where you can actually look back over the stuff that you have done and see your progress to give
Hmm.
you that boost of energy to keep going. Another great reason to make sure your finances are in order. So I would love to thank Taliba again for joining us. Please visit TMB Taxes for more info. Please take care of yourselves. Please wear your masks. Make sure you're social distance and get vaccinated if you can. I'd love to see y'all all in person one day real soon. So let's make sure we're being as safe and healthy as we possibly can. See y'all next time.